Welcome to the Efed Podcast, the podcast exploring our fantasy wrestling hobby, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real. I'm your host, Mikey Unlikely, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here today on the Atomic Dropcast Network. We're back again for another exciting episode. We've reached December, and the Efed Podcast is officially a month old. Special thank you to everyone out there listening. We appreciate all the support you're giving us, and we've got an interview list a mile long, so we're excited to keep this rolling. If you guys are digging the show, go ahead and subscribe on whatever platform you're using. If you want to interact with us, you can find us on Twitter at the Efed Podcast. We're open to hearing from you. We want to hear your suggestions, your criticisms, and your accusations. This week on the show, we've got the Efed Question of the Week brought to you by the EWC, and man, is it a fun one. We've got the interview with one of the most infamous handlers in the hobby, Mike Best. Stay tuned for that. It's a hell of an interview and quite possibly our longest one yet. Before we get to all that, however, we've got some new feds in the Fed list this week.
Defiance, an Angle Fed boasting 8 years of continuous fantasy wrestling. Defiance offers opportunities for original characters, micros, a standalone website utilizing Backstage 3 script, and a forum hosted on the long-running fwrestling.com, as well as a roster full of some of the most experienced writers in the game. Come see for yourself at defiancewrestling.com. That's defiancewrestling.com.
It's time for the Feds list. Sinister Wrestling is a semi-monthly Angle hardcore Fed that runs similarly to promotions like GCW, Beyond Wrestling, and PWG. It's all wrapped into one huge thing. We're looking for tag teams at the moment, but all are welcome to join in on the fun at Sinister. Punk rock, cold beer, and professional wrestling. What more could you want in a show? SinisterWrestling.freeforums.net. Check them out. Idaho Wrestling is a hybrid roleplay Angle Fed. They're looking for characters of all genders, races, shapes, and sizes. Looking to build a territorial Fed that could ultimately be a nationally recognized company. A talking cat provides play-by-play, so if you're looking for a serious organization, we might not be for you. However, one little quirk is that the talent are also made part owners of the company. So the future direction of the Fed will be based on certain business decisions that the handlers vote on. Take a look around the board, read the general information page, and sign the hell up. Or don't. IdahoWrestling.jcinc.net. That's IdahoWrestling.jcinc.net. WrestleWorld is a wrestling company that celebrates any and all styles of professional wrestling across the globe. Step into the new world and compete with the best of them as you create your story and become closer and closer to pursuing one or more of the 4 unique, prestigious championships the company has to offer. WrestleWorld has its own set of architects to challenge newcomers at the dawn of the new age, and then you, the champions of tomorrow, will unravel and create the world to come. They're a bi-weekly Fed with a 2-promo limit. Check them out at wrestleworld.forummotion.com or at WrestleWorld19 on Twitter. Splatpoint Archives is a host site for classic Efed cards from 1994 through 2018. They're looking for Efed libraries that are no longer active. Splat Archives will remix, remaster, and restore your catalog back to its former glory. If any Feds would like to see their product on display, contact Splatpoint Media on Twitter at Splatpoint. That's SPLATPOINT, Splatpoint. Insurgents Wrestling Cartel. They're looking for role players. The site is new and paid for, and the goal is to be around for the long haul. They want members who will make the shows more interesting by submitting sneak attacks, interference, and in-card promos. Check them out at insurgentswrestlingcartel.com. That's insurgentswrestlingcartel.com. 4CW has been around since 2004. It is currently a monthly Efed that beautifully mixes angle and role-playing feuds and storylines. History is the biggest ally as they have a plethora of unique homegrown matches, titles, pay-per-views, and much more. Come join the wrestling family and test your skills in the legendary and prestigious 4CW. We always have a good time, review each other's matches, segments, and writing, help each other out, and politics do not exist. A lot of current talent is seasoned through the years of Efedding and are here just to tell their stories. Check them out at www.4wforums.com. That's the number 4, wforums.com. And finally, something a little different on the Feds list. In an effort to bring eFeds into the public eye, this book series is being made. The Enigma Network is a fight-based broadcasting company that showcases the efforts of multiple promotions of various styles. Original Choice Wrestling contains over 30 talents that all have their own stories and grow over time. Honor Pro, a hybrid that combines the rawness of prison warfare with the chaos of mixed martial arts, continues this trend. For more information or to find the book series, go to Amazon and search T.L. Brown OCW. T.L. Brown himself can be reached on most social media under @TL_Enigma. Check it out, guys. A guy writing his eFed as a book series and actually having them self-published. Join them. Be different. It's all right. TL Enigma. Go on Amazon and search TL Brown OCW. Check out the books. Hey guys, are you digging this podcast? Well, we really appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you check out my other podcast. The Atomic Dropcast is a look back at the wrestling of yesteryear through adult eyes. We watch the wrestling that we watched as kids, as adults, with a couple of beers in our hands. It's a great time. Check it out over at atomicdropcast.com. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Alright guys, it's that time again. It's time for the Efed Question of the Week. And it's brought to you by the EWC. The Extreme Wrestling Corporation is the game's longest running roleplay fed, having been established in 1997. I was like 9 years old. With over 100 active role players across 4 unique brands. Not even the WWE has 4 brands, guys. Come on. The EWC offers opt-in booking on all of its bi-weekly shows, home to Stranglemania, the 4-day wrestling festival known as WrestleFest. The EWC is built on its welcoming community with zero bias, no drama. All styles are welcome. Come check out the EWC today at EWC4life.com. EWC, the number 4, life.com. This week's question of the week was, what wrestling trope are you sick of reading in eFedding? And my goodness, did we get a lot of answers to this question. I'm going to go a little above and beyond today. Typically, I give you about 10 or so answers. I'm going to go about 15 today, just because I had a lot of fun with this one. Up first is Topher Constantine Jr., our old friend, at 99% LLC. So, also love when, a 120-pound hardcore female deadlifts a 6'5", 300-pound bro over their head and launches them into a crowd from the middle of the ring. Super believable, bro, and great storytelling. Thanks, Thanks, Topher. Great follow on Twitter, guys. All right, up next we got Christian Koscheck at Not So Christian with a K. Bitter, jealous people that complain about something that someone else does, just to turn around and do the same thing that they called them out for. Couldn't agree more. At Lisa Conrana, anyone who starts a tweet with, quote, as a Fed head, quote, and Feds that will post results several weeks late, but still expect you to drop 3 role plays on a 3-day turnaround so they can get back on track. Their problem is now your problem, Lisa Conrana. At IW Puddings on Twitter, paragraphs longer than 6 sentences without a break. Blocks of text, as Ben Halcomb would say. At 8 Empress, the number 8 Empress. She left us with a list. Here we go. Dead family, evil owner or general manager, huge star from another Fed, as in no one cares, married, pregnant, divorced in a month, and hooks up with someone else. Late results, flaking on storylines, bringing out of character into in character. No selling serious injuries, and the owner giving away titles. Nice list there. Appreciate that. At Colby Corver. When I first got into the hobby in the early 2000s, there seemed to be multiple Ministry ripoff stables in every single Fed. Currently, by the looks of my timeline, it appears that female wrestlers constantly posting not safe for work Twitter pictures have taken a commanding lead. More on that in the interview later on. At Nike Pro _ Combat. Characters that are blatant ripoffs of their pick bases. It's unoriginal, weak, and has no place in CAW-only feds. It's not hard to be original enough to create a character that isn't just a pick base, if you smell what someone else is cooking. At Queen of the Ring, all hail. Everybody and their mother having their own gym. I don't think Mikey would have a gym. I think he would have a studio. Who knows? At War Matsuda. When you have a hot prospect who leaves after failing to capture a title, there's so many great handlers who give up after their first major loss. And it's usually the character's first title match. Very, very true. I hate to see people give in too early just because they lose a big match. It's easy to bounce back from a storytelling standpoint. At official _ SCW, the never-ending need for an all-consuming authority figure, a commissioner, an owner, etc. Having one is one thing, but having them on every show and involved in most angles somehow is overkill. Couldn't agree more. At Rebel Roads, 1 week relationships ending in marriage, 3-week pregnancies, kids becoming teenagers overnight, badasses who didn't earn the reputation, OOC bleeding into in character. I have pages of these, I could go on. Strong response from most of you guys on this question. I love it. Bring it on. At Def Wrestling, Defiance Wrestling. Commas. I mean, seriously, folks, be more original. Love you, Brian. At Centurion Real. Horror porn. The folks who write really graphic role plays featuring death and violence. It doesn't make a lot of sense for someone who sets a stranger on fire to lose to someone in the opening match of the show. I love that answer. Hey, baby girl. She would walk out during that answer. At Booby Dean. Twitter lesbians. Come on. You're usually 2 dudes cybersexing, and it's more than a little disturbing. People using out-of-character insults about a handler and passing them off as in-character. People taking this shit entirely too seriously, and no selling a match result. Check, 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 check. Agreed all the way, Bobo. I'm feeling it. At JVD Rooster, the old man, selling. Sell your match, sell your opponent, sell the location, sell yourself. Too many no-sell, and if it doesn't work in their favor, some just no-sell the whole damn thing. You hurt your opponent, the Fed, and yourself by no-selling. So sell, and sell it well. The old man turning into a salesman. How about that? I love it. Good advice, though. And that's what we got for the question of the week this week, brought to you by the EWC. Check them out, EWC4life.com. All right, guys, it's time for another interview here at the Efed Podcast. And this week we have High Octane Wrestling's own Mike Best. Hope you enjoy the interview as much as I did interviewing him. Check it out and let us know what you think. All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the interview here on the Efed Podcast. This week we've got Mike, who is the handler of the legendary Mike Best. Mike, how you doing today?
I'm doing just fine. How you doing, Mike?
Awesome. It's going to be an awkward episode, Mike.
You sure will be, Mike.
No, thank you for coming on. We appreciate your time, and we're excited to have you here on the show.
Ah, man, I'm glad to be here. Kind of ended up being a happy accident that I got slotted in, so I'm excited. I've been ready to do this all week.
It worked out. It was slated to be a How episode anyway, so it worked out just fine.
Rest in peace, Crash Rodriguez.
Mike, how did you get into professional wrestling?
Oh, I feel like my stepdad got me into it. Like I don't remember not being into wrestling. So I must have been like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. Maybe I got started on WCW because I had super repressive mom. So I wasn't allowed to listen to good rap. I didn't see my first R-rated movie until I was like old enough to see it. Like I know all the words to the 1999 album Will Smith's Millennium.
There you go.
Because that was that kind of childhood. So I watched WCW, and I remember coming in. It had to be after the NWO got started because they were already a thing, but it hadn't jumped the shark yet. Like the NWO Black and White was way too big, but they hadn't started splitting into factions yet.
Right.
So it was about that time.
Okay.
And then I would sneak and watch WWF when my parents weren't like hanging over my head and watch Stone Cold hit stunners and shit.
Middle
that
fingers.
Was like. So it was really a really short gap between getting into wrestling and finding e-fedding, because I started e-fedding in '99. Basically, that 20 years ago this year.
There you go. Happy anniversary.
Feels too long. Feels like I should have been done with this by now. I remember when I was like, I must have been like 18, 19 years old. I was e-fedding with this dude. He used to go by Curtis Knight or Johnny All-Star. He might still be kicking around out there somewhere. And his name's Dennis. And Dennis was like 34 or 35 when I was 18. He was a good buddy of mine. But in the back of my head, I was always thinking, kind of fucking weird that he's still doing this at like 35. I'd kill myself if I was still doing this at 35. And now I'm turning 33 in February, and I'm like, I got another good run in me.
Yeah, I got one more good angle. Yeah, I got it.
E-fedding feels like real pro wrestling to me in the way that, like, you say you're retired a million times, but nobody can stay away.
Yeah, you can take a break, but you're coming back.
Yeah, I don't want to be Ric Flair someday, but in whatever form e-fedding may or may not still exist. When I'm 60, I might still be doing it. I don't know.
That's the Mike Bell of e-wrestling.
I miss Mike. Whatever happened to Mike Bell?
Yeah, he's working hard. Doing the police thing.
The first of many. By the way, if you didn't listen to the last EFED podcast, well, it won't be the last one as of the airing of this. If you didn't listen to the Eric Dane episode, listen to the Eric Dane episode. It's going to come up a few times tonight. But there's the very first parallel, is both of us wondering what the hell Mike Bell's up to these days.
Mike Bell did, in fact, hear the Eric Dane episode and enjoyed it. So there is that. He is out there. He is doing well.
I also, since I know he's a listener, I have to apologize because I 100% in a Fed called OCW ripped off Dynasty's theme from UTA. It was too good to pass up. Nobody was using it. Used When the Levee Breaks for a hot minute. Great E-Fed music choice.
Well, you touched on it a little bit. How did you find e-wrestling?
You know, I do not remember. Everybody's always like, oh, I found it in like an AOL chat room, or, you know, Eric Dane claims to have been doing it by typewriter in 1972. I really don't remember. I just remember there was a time I didn't know what it was, and then I remember my very first match in an E-Fed, and I don't remember how I got to that point. I just remember that my very first E-Fedding match was as a special referee in an exploding ring death match between the Hardcore Kid and Bad Brett with 2 Ds.
Oh. And
somehow, while they both made it out of the match unscathed, I got handcuffed to the ring post and had both of my characters' arms blown off in his first match.
And you knew then this was the hobby for you.
I absolutely did. And then I don't remember anything for maybe 2 years after that. And then, like, my modern day e-fedding, like memories kick in. I just remember that one. I don't know if you can get PTSD from a fake pretend wrestling game, but I guess that one stands out. Yeah, I really don't remember how I got into it. I just remember that at one point I was.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's good stuff. So, who were the early characters before Mike Best?
It's, interestingly enough, it's always been, with one exception. I'm gonna make an embarrassing confession on your show that I've never publicly confessed to before.
Please go ahead.
But in a moment, I'm gonna put a pin in that, because it's always been the same character from day one. But I used to use my what we would affectionately refer to as my shoot name, because when I started, I was like, I don't know, 10, 11, whatever age I was when I started, there was no Google yet.
No.
And when we all started, if you claimed that you weren't a wish fulfillment superhero syndrome fan fiction writer when you started e-fetting, you're a liar. We were all just making ourselves as wrestlers. None of us had the fucking creativity to create a totally new person if you started when you were like 10.
12 years old, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like you're barely out of the age bracket where like I was like in the backyard pretending to be a Power Ranger with a toy rake, and then suddenly I was e-fetting.
And then you were, jumping, pretending to wrestle in the backyard.
Yeah, so I was I was using my real first and last name, and the gimmicks were terrible. I think I was the lady. I'll use my shoot name. I don't care. I was the ladies' man, Mike Paloe, for a while. Sergeant Mike Paloe. He wasn't a soldier. He just wore camo pants because in WWF WrestleMania 2000, my creator wrestler had camo pants.
So clearly,
he was just Sergeant Mike. Why not?
Why not?
It took many, many years for me to like start developing like real character skills and like painting a real wrestling character. Probably into like my mid to later teens. The only exception to using the same character, I mean, I've had we're going to talk about Alex Beckman later, talk about a few other things, but those are like man shit in like the last 5 years. But back then I ran an E-Fed called The Real WWE. I couldn't tell you the year. I just know that I'm pretty sure we were still really relieved that the nukes didn't go off in 2000. Like it was shortly after that. And I ran one of those elusive, you never even hear about them anymore, but one of those elusive real wrestler feds.
Yeah, that's how I started.
Yeah, and I didn't know how to recruit. I didn't know how to get members. So I probably had 5 actual members of that fed. But I just remember thinking, like, if it looks busy, people will join. So I was like role-playing like 12 characters in this fed.
No.
Even back then, I was smart enough to know to only book them against each other.
Right.
Because fed heads competing in their own feds are garbage. At least competitively. You do what you got to do for fun, but if your fed head is in the title picture and your own fed, quit that fed immediately. So like I'm cutting promos like Kevin Nash versus The Rock, and I'm writing them both, and no one's giving a shit, and not in like a JD Elder running MVW and PCW, these little one-man angle feds that everybody likes. I was writing role plays against myself. It was pretty bad. I don't think I've ever talked about this before. It was really, really terrible.
That's awesome.
And of course, the president of the company, Prez Mike with a Z.
Prez Mike P. So,
not even just Prez Mike? First name only, like Elvis or Cher, why not?
So who's the favorite real wrestler to write for?
Oh, man, it's so long ago. It's probably not a matter of who is the favorite. It's more like who is the easiest. Because at that point in time, oh, yeah, absolutely. 100% it was The Rock. I mean, half of e-fetting these days for everybody's super original, oh my God, my character development is so strong characters, you're all just writing a version of The Rock.
Yeah, it's The Rock.
Everybody's just writing a version of The Rock. And if you are a good guy who talks mean shit to the heels and the fans pop, you're The Rock. Because the Attitude Era, Austin and The Rock and DX, that was the beginning of the good guys aren't just white meat baby faces.
No, now it's a blurred line.
Yeah, so everybody's just doing a variation on, even me, like I'm not like holier than anybody else, like I'm just Jericho or The Rock or like a Flair, like everybody's ripping those off. So whenever anybody's like, yeah, here's Eric Dane reference number 3, when he's, oh, everybody bites my shtick. Well, yeah, when you describe yourself as Jericho Flair, yeah, every heel's biting your shit because we're all biting Jericho and Flair, you narcissist. It's what we're all doing. But you can run an interesting character who's like, I'm a movie star and I'm a wrestler. but you cannot run an interesting character who is like, and by the way, it's always a Twitter lesbian. It's always a dude.
we're gonna get
chick.
there too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got a lot to say about Twitter lesbians, but it's always a Twitter lesbian. Cause I got a record to set straight there. And she's always a single mom who only likes women. So I don't even want to speculate as to how that baby happened. So we don't get really dark. I'm just going to say Jesus did it. And then she's always a model and a rock star and a movie star, and she drives a Dodge Viper, and all of the role plays are about just trying to get by as a single mom. Go fuck yourself.
Sell the Viper. Come on.
Like, because we're made up characters, I always cringe a little when people try to incorporate their characters into the real world. Like, no, you weren't in a movie with Brad Pitt. You weren't. Because your character doesn't exist. In actual pro wrestling, I can buy that Dolph Ziggler's in a movie. Right. Because he's a celebrity. Up until recently, there was one major wrestling promotion. Two, if you kind of count TNA. And like now some others are getting bigger, and AEW's there, and now NJPW and ROH have some name recognition. But even then, nobody from ROH is a headline movie star. So because we're made up characters, it can get cringy really easy when you try to incorporate them into the real world. I don't even like it when feds are like, our show is on Hulu. No, it's not. I watch Hulu all the time. I've never seen UTA on Hulu before. That's so weird. I must not be regionally available to me. Just use your creativity and make up a wrestling network. If you want to be a movie star, make up a movie.
Yeah.
Or have the ego potential to be like a B-level movie actor.
Exactly.
And do shitty CM Punk straight to DVD movies. Like, just have a little humility. There are 10,000 e-fedding companies. There's no way you're a millionaire. There just isn't.
Well, you could have worked for all 10,000.
Well, sure, but supply and demand dictates that you might, like, you're basically working for McDonald's French fry coupons after a certain point. Like, I think HOW pays its wrestlers like $5,000 a week or something, which is still a fuck ton of money, but you're not going to become a millionaire fast there. Shout out to in-character Efed Questions. I don't think that's the actual order of the words, but everybody knows the account I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I love that account. I love that guy's just doing this thing, or girl could be, just doing this thing to help people like answer questions about their characters and work shit out. But also, I love that account because it tells me who I hate.
Exactly.
Like, they did one yesterday. What's the last big splurge purchase you did? The last big ticket item you bought? And I'm watching all these, like, bingo hall work for a Fed with 12 people in it. People being like, I don't usually ball out, but I bought myself a Dodge Viper. Yeah, I bet you did. You know how much a Dodge Viper costs you fuck? I'll pay your rent. Jesus. Anyway, that tangent's over. What were we talking about?
Well, we'll get back to Twitter lesbians. Don't worry. So no, we were talking about your favorites, but let's talk about let's talk about your favorite wrestlers growing up.
Favorite wrestler? I mean, everybody. Like, I was a rock guy. Like, the mainstream answers are going to be the same for most people.
Yeah.
Like, there was a reason those guys were the titans of their time. So I'll try to dig into some of the people I liked that less people liked at the time. I'm pretty sure I was a Kevin Nash mark.
Who wasn't it in 1996? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's another one of those things. Like, well, obviously everybody was. I always liked the bad guys. I almost never liked the good guys, with the exception of Austin and The Rock, because they were just bad guys who got cheered for.
You're right.
I was a huge mark for Solo Christian, mostly because of his theme music with that operatic Christian, at last you were on your own.
I love Solo Christian so much, and his peeps, and before the haircut, after the haircut, the Intercontinental title run. I was a huge Christian fan.
Oh yeah, Christian was just the best. It took me a long time to like Edge, but same, Christian I was on board with like right away. I was on like the AJ Styles train way before he got like a TV deal, just by happenstance, because I went to an event called Ballpark Brawl some years ago in Buffalo, New York. And AJ Styles was there. He did a triple threat tables match. Him, Teddy Hart, and Sabu.
It sounds
and
about right.
AJ's, yeah, it was an insane match. Like Teddy Hart did like a double moonsault or something off of like the batter's cage.
I saw Teddy Hart last year, and I think he did a double moonsault off the batter's cage.
Yeah, that's basically his gimmick, is go to ballparks and just wrestle for $12 and try not to die.
Yes, he's crazy.
Yeah, AJ Styles, when he left the match, he came through the crowd. And I got to carry AJ Styles' whatever indie belt he was carrying at the time. He let me carry his belt back to the entrance ramp. So I've been an AJ Styles fan like for life from like back. And this is like little AJ too, when he was still wearing like the shell necklace all the time, and he still had like the long sort of skater hair. And this wasn't a childhood, but I've been a Jon Moxley fan since
CZW
before. Oh yeah, like the old deathmatch days, like when he was still like cringing his way, trying to figure out if he was going to be Heath Ledger Joker or not. Like the old promos, you can still find them. If you've never looked up old Jon Moxley promos, like don't pause this episode because this is money. But as soon as you're done with this, go look them up on YouTube. Some of them are a little cringy, but even the ones that are cringy are better than anything you'll see scripted.
Yeah,
but there's a promo called I'm a sick guy, and it made me I was stealing from. I was so disappointed when he got signed by WWE, because I wasn't going to be able to steal from Jon Moxley anymore. Not like lines, just essence.
Yeah, he has very Brian Pillman-esque loose cannon like promos. It was so good.
Yeah, so like of all time, it's Moxley and Jericho. So I'm real excited about what they're building for the next big AEW pay-per-view.
So you kind of covered the history of your characters. Talk to us about how Mike Best came about.
Oh, see, that's pretty cool. So for that to make sense, as far back as I'm going to go, I was in a Fed called SVO for a while. And the only reason I mention that is because their shows like are getting re-aired right now. And I actually ended up getting a hold of John Page, who's a member of EW Mania now. And he went back through and edited my last name and changed it to Best in all those old shows since they're being re-aired for me. And shout out to him because that's awesome. I appreciate that. Because I used to be an insurance agent and I couldn't have my real name out there. It's really easy to lose an insurance license. I'm not an insurance agent anymore, so I don't give a shit. But I was in SVO. And I was their micro artist for as much shit as I give people about micros now because I think it's funny. I was like one of the big micro guys back in the day. And from SVO, I went to Hostility. And then from Hostility, I went to Dream Wrestling, which is where like I consider my modern e-fedding history to start. And I was a Ben Halcomb Fed.
Okay.
And in Dream, I was the Dream Women's Champion.
Women's Champion.
It was a convoluted storyline. It was basic. I mean, it's basic Andy Kaufman.
Okay.
Where Mike Best sues, who was not Mike Best yet, but sues Dream Wrestling for discrimination because there's a world championship division and a women's division, but there's not a men's division. So using that old high school athletics, you can be on the other team if there's not one for your gender logic. Mike Best sues the athletic commission and Dream to compete in the women's division. The OOC behind it was Ben was going to get rid of the women's championship, and I was in a stable with like the two singles champions in the Fed, so I had really nothing to do. I was just floating around. So when he told me he was going to get rid of the belt, I was like, don't get rid of the belt. I will repopulate your women's division. So we just ran an angle where Mike Best became the women's champion, and then weekly I would just write matches that were just segments. Just Mike Best beating up local talent, just like bringing women in from the crowd and beating them up and pinning them and calling himself the greatest women's champion of all time. And then slowly but surely other Feds started getting on board and like sending female wrestlers over to fight Mike Best. The whole thing culminated in like I went over to an Angle Fed and did a battle royal where like it was a women's battle royal and all the women just turned on Mike Best, beat the shit out of him, and threw him out of the ring. And then finally, we were planning a blow off for the whole thing because the world title picture freed up, and Ben wanted me to go after Doozer, which is a name that was still floating around even back then.
Yeah,
Scott,
Doozer's
good
back.
old Scott. And me and him ended up having some like crazy ass feuds, but to get there, I had to get rid of the women's title, and fortune favored us because Tommy Crimson, aka Chance Von Crank, aka Chance Von Flake, go fuck yourself, hate that guy, was like the secondary showrunner, and they had a second show. Ben went out of town on business, and like Von Flake booked his female character against me in a cage match, and then like just like straight jobbed me out to a staff character because he just didn't like me. Ben came back and was so pissed off, but he's like, you can't just undo a match. It doesn't work like that. Like, it's done now, so what do we do? So we did like a big press conference where Mike Best comes out and admits that he pissed hot before his last fight, and that he was being he had unfortunately tested at over 600% the allowable level of testosterone for the women's division. Clearly he must have been on something, so Dream Wrestling had no choice but to cancel out his last fight and retire the championship. So I technically retired the championship undefeated. The only reason this is relevant now is because in the EW Mania tournament that's going on, it will probably be over, if not almost over, by the time this airs. But in the very first round, I brought back the Dream Women's Championship and put it on the line in that tournament against a girl from Action Wrestling, Jerry Miller, and won. But all that going on got the attention of HOW because Dream Wrestling was a part of the WFWA, which was run by Eric Dane. And HOW took notice because Cool Cancer Giles was up next in line for a shot at the WFWA World Championship. And he didn't really want to do it. And he finally did it. He clearly wrote the best role play for the match. And he clearly jobbed out to the Defiance champion. Weird how the role play judges kept putting their Defiance guy over. Defiance, the Fed that opened up to spite me and HOW, even though I wasn't in HOW yet, but it's cool how history works.
Check out Defiance Wrestling.
So Justin hit me up, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but since my name came up when you guys were talking about the WFWA, and this directly leads into the creation of Mike Best, Justin hits me up on AOL Instant Messenger, and me and him had been mods on EWZ back in the day. And I'd been just like burying Defiance all over the place. Defiance sucks, fuck Defiance, blah, 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 a bunch of hacks. Standard shit talk. And he was like, hey, I want to put you in line for the next title shot in the WFWA. But here's the thing. I can't have the potential WFWA champ talking shit about my Fed. And he says this never happened. I'm petty as shit. I'm 32 years old. I still have the transcripts of this conversation in my Gmail. I read them out loud on High Octane Radio 10 years ago. He's basically like, I'll give you a WFWA world title shot. All you got to do is start putting over my Fed. And I was like, that's really cheese dicky. Let's not do that. So instead of doing that, I joined HOW, which I'll double back to in a second, and instead just read that whole chat transcript on HOW's radio show, which is actually the shot that started the 10-year Defiance versus HOW war. It's funny how that part didn't come up.
No, it
but
certainly
that's what
didn't.
actually started that. Was a shady potential business dealing, and the reason that giant interfeds don't work. Like I'm mostly saying this in jest because that's the reason interfeds never work. Even if it was like completely legit, it doesn't look good when you run a Fed and you run the interfed and your guy's the champion. You can't win. Even if your guy's the best guy, everybody's always gonna say you had everything handed to you. I know my character's name is Mike Best. His dad is Lee Best, who runs HOW, which we'll get to. Like, I know what it's like for people to credit all your shit or think you run the Fed you don't even run. But anyway, so Lee Best hits me up on AOL, and he's like, hey, are you a champion in Dream? And I said, well, I said, I'm not. I literally just lost the belt last week. He goes, oh, well, put me in contact with one of your champions. I was like, well, fuck you. You're in contact with me. What's up? And he's like, oh, well, I need somebody to come on at Iconic. And Iconic is HOW's big WrestleMania type show. And he just wanted to, like, because we were all in this big interfed, he wanted to bring in a Dream guy to, like, beat up his champion and just, like, start some interfed shit. Well, instead, he grabbed me, and I debuted into HOW as Mike Paloe and hit the world champion dressed up as Santa Claus with a big sack full of gifts. I ended up sticking around, and I didn't, like, ghost on Dream. I told Ben, hey, I think I'm going to go do this, because, like, I'd been a fan of HOW for years and years, because for anybody who doesn't know, HOW's been around since, like, 2002. They've taken a few little breaks here and there, but they were always planned breaks. Sometimes the break was 6 months, sometimes it was, like, 2 years, but, like, they've never just disappeared out of nowhere. It's always like, we're going to build up to this final pay-per-view, and then we're going to go on a hiatus for a while. I think the longest run they had was the previous run. It was like 8 years, and they're in the middle of this 8-year run when I joined up. But I'd been in, like, a bunch of feds where people had said, fuck Lee Best, I'll never go back to HOW. And when you hear that enough times, I'm like, what the fuck is HOW?
You get intrigued.
I go check out their website. Their website at the time was the best website I think they've ever had. It's like nothing technologically compared to what it is now. I think it's all through WordPress, but it was like an old, like, Drupal back end, and it was the coolest e-wrestling website I'd ever seen. I felt like a kid on the indies looking at the WWE's, like, locker room. And I was like, oh man, I wonder if I'll ever be good enough to be in a fed like this. And that's years and years prior. So when Lee Best hit me up and was looking for somebody to come in, like, legitimately, I felt like I was about to get into the WWE. Because Dream was the biggest fed I'd been in my whole life up to that point. So I go to HOW. I have my very first match against a guy who's now one of my best friends, Max Cale, and I got my ass handed to me. It wasn't even close. I think by the role play scale, it was almost a full point better than mine, which is huge. Like, nowadays, I consider it a big victory if I beat an equally talented guy by, like, 0.05. And Max Cale beat me by almost a full point. I came in thinking I was hot shit, and I got wrecked. And I was like, fuck, no, this is the place I need to be. Like, this is where I'm going to get better. So probably midway into my first year there, it's a convoluted story that's not worth telling all of, but my character got powerbombed through the floor of the Roman Coliseum at a pay-per-view called March to Glory against Christopher America. A match that just finally had its feud blown off 10 years later at our last pay-per-view in HOW, Rumble at the Rock. That feud went 10 years, 3 matches over 10 years. They were all violent death fests. And so the way that it happened, the injury occurred on, like, it was like the day before Good Friday. And I was going to take, like, a couple weeks off. So, and this is 10 years ago. I still wasn't as mentally sound as far as what is a good idea versus what isn't 10 years ago. So I'm like, I'll put my character into a coma. Well, the timing of it worked out that Mike Best falls into a coma on Good Friday. And then it's like a 3-day coma or something. He wakes up on Easter and thinks he's Jesus.
Okay.
So I just started running. It was just a dumb comedy gimmick. Mike Best thought he was the second coming of Christ. He had apostles. He had a talking squirrel. I think I had a narrator that my character talked to back then. It was dumb but funny. And so Lee hits me up on the sneak and is like, hey, I always call Lee the god of HOW. If you're going to start calling yourself Jesus, what if, like, Mike Best was Lee's bastard son? And this worked because he knew I was trying to come up with a way to get my real name out of Efed. Because at this point, Google's a thing. Like, you can Google my name and like words like rape and racism start coming up associated with my name. It's not good. I was a big old edgelord. So we basically just built out what ended up being one of the biggest, longest, and still ongoing storylines probably ever in Efedding, but definitely in HOW, where my character became the son of his character just because it was a weird idea during booking on the fly. Because we post our results live. So a match goes up and everybody can read it, and then the next segment goes up, and then the next segment, and then the next match. So if something happens on the show that you want to react to, if you're watching it go up live, you can type up a segment and submit it and get it thrown in later in the show.
Wow.
It's really cool. It's one of the biggest, like, not to go into full shill mode, but like it's one of the biggest draws of HOW to me. There's just no other feds that do it that way. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, it's a cool idea, fucking do it. We encourage other feds to do it. It's an awesome way to post your results because everything feels organic. You don't have to, like, you know, the way it usually works is you have to get with somebody and plan out all your segments for a show if you want continuity to be there, and then there's no surprises for you. But if Mikey Unlikely has a surprise debut into HOW and calls me out, we don't have to wait for the next show. I'll respond to your segment later that night. And I will still get the surprise of, holy shit, Mikey Unlikely's there. So instead of getting some watered down segment that I worked on for 5 days and made just right, you get my raw reaction to it that I had to type up in one draft in 15 minutes to get it in time. And it's just cool as shit. And it was just one of those booking on the flies at like midnight that created Mike Best. And of course led into the whole, like, Mike Best is privileged. He gets special treatment because of his dad. Like, that was the storyline. My character has been irrevocably connected to his character since. It gives me like a weird amount of leeway, but also very little character freedom. Because if I'm going to do something crazy with my character, I kind of need Lee to sign off on it. Because he's connected. In the same way that if you were a member of a tag team that was like a perma tag team and you're going to do something nuts, you kind of want your partner to sign off on it because he's going to have to deal with it too. And I'm always tied into whatever big political storyline is going on in the Fed, because if there is a corporation, Shane McMahon is either in it or he's against it. He can't exist on the roster outside of it. If there's no corporation, he can live his life. But if there is a corporation, and if Vince is on TV and Shane's there, he's either with his dad or he's not.
Right.
So it was a little limiting for a while. But yeah, I mean, it's been about 10 years now. About 10 years that I've been Mike Best, son of high octane wrestling promoter Lee Best. And a lot of people think we're the same person. We are not.
That's awesome. And that's a great story and how it became, you know, from one name to another. So you kind of told us about how you got into how you found how, knocked all those questions, but talk to us about the subsequent years, the last 10 or 11. Talk to us about some of the bigger feuds and bigger moments that Mike Best has had there. And also touch on your role with the company now.
So, see, a lot of these details I'm going to spare the listeners just because there's a lot of these guys who are HOW lifers. You've never heard of them, you've never been in a Fed with them, and you probably don't give a fuck about them, and that's fair. They don't give a fuck about you either. They're just guys who live there. So I'll try to touch on stuff with, like, names that people might recognize.
Okay.
One of the... Let's see, I got to skip a lot of years, because for a lot of years we had a really big roster and applications were closed. It's really only in like the last, the big ongoing storyline has always kind of been Mike versus Lee in some capacity. Either we're on the same side or we're not on the same side, and everybody else is sort of a pawn in that game in a roundabout way. It sounds more masturbatory than it is. It's always been pretty organic. Because legitimately, me and Lee don't always, this run in 2019 is the first time me and him almost always agree on everything. We used to get into like, we'd get on the phone and yell at each other. And like, just like, nah, it's fucking stupid. You don't know how to book, blah, blah, blah. Like, over not match results, like storyline ideas. Because Lee's always like, oh, you should have Mike Best do a bump off some stripper's tits while Lee's fucking her. And I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. How about this smart storyline? He's like, that's boring as shit. Where's the cocaine? Like, he is like an attitude era mark. And I mean that with love. And I'm more of like, I like smart wrestling storylines that sometimes aren't all that big. I like subtlety and stuff, which is funny for me to say because everybody thinks of me as a loudmouth, and I am, but there's always a reason I say everything I say, even if it's big and grandiose. So we disagree on a lot. So it's very easy for us to just go at war. And a lot of wrestlers get involved in those things on various sides. But as far as people that the e-fetting community at large would know, a lot of my feuds started on Twitter. Madman Zelinsky versus Mike Best started in like 2014. And then Lee and I had a very legitimate falling out in 2014, and I ended up going to UTA, which... not with Mike Best as a manager, and I know we were going to talk about that separately, so I'll let that lie for now. But
yeah,
so a lot of like that whole period was basically just me feuding with HOW over Twitter and getting Ben involved and being very petty, where like he was taking shots at HOW every week, and so most of my big feuds with like outside people have come in the year 2019. I spent like a week in 4CW, but I flaked out. It was the first and only time I've ever actually flaked out. I just got really busy, forgot I'd joined 4CW, and Perry didn't realize it till like my second no-show in a row. So technically I think my record there is like 1-2. But my big feud it's me versus Eric Dane is the big feud of the last 10 years. That feud has never stopped. That feud briefly paused in UTA, but that's like a real and like it's an IC-OOC feud. It's kind of both. But we're friends, but we're not, but we're friends, but we're not. It's a weird thing. It's the same with me and Madman Zelinsky. I talked to that dude on the phone earlier today. But also, there's a very good chance that tomorrow I'm going to tell him to stop fucking talking about his diabetes on the internet because no one cares. And I'm going to mean it. And then I'm going to DM him after and be like, I know that was harsh, but you know it's fair. Like, Twitter is my medium. The actual wrestling storylines, it's all guys like Max Cale, and nobody knows Max. If you're not following him on Twitter, you should be. He is my second favorite Twitter account in the world.
He's so good.
And then my big buddy is Cecilworth Farthington, who, if you're not nearly enough people are following Farthington, he is my favorite Twitter account in the world. And most of the last like few years has just been us kind of jerking ourselves off because nobody wants to, like, everybody wants to talk shit from a distance, but nobody actually wants to like do feuds anymore. I think that's the thing in e-fetting that changed the most for me, and I know this has nothing to do with the question you answered me, but it's kind of why I can't answer it, is outside of these big names that were HOW only, Max Cale, Jat Starr, Shane Reynolds, Jace Parker Davidson, Aseldama, like I could rattle off 20 guys I had huge feuds with. But that was like all up to the year 2014. And then we started to get this new crop of people blending or sort of coming into the zeitgeist of e-fetting, and they're just people who find enjoyment in the hobby in a different way, and they want to tell their own. Did you hear the diplomacy in that?
I got that. Yeah,
they're like, they want to build their stories. Their stories are kind of like, this is my opponent this week and I beat them and now here's some more about my story. Or I lost to this person and here's how it affects my story. That's a fine way to do things, but it doesn't meld with me. I have a hard time working with those people. Because for me, a storyline is we're going to tell a story together and we're going to start it this week. and we're going to work together on it very hard. I can do it one of two ways. We can write every ounce of everything together, which is how me and Max Cale have feuded for 10 years. Where like we literally work on our role plays together, except for the ones that matter. Once we get to the blow-off match, may the best man win. Or I can do it where like we vaguely talk about what we're going to do, but we want to keep it kind of real. So I don't want to know what you're going to talk shit about. I want to read your segment. I want to respond to it organically. Where you just have to agree at the beginning, we're not going to let each other's feelings get hurt. Nobody's allowed to get butthurt about this. Let's just fucking go at each other. Those are my favorites. But that doesn't work anymore. You can't do it. I would legitimately guess I'm probably blocked by 60 to 70 people on Twitter minimum. And some of them I've just talked in character shit to. I made fun of some stoner character. I know that doesn't narrow it down because all the cool kids make sure their characters smoke pot in all their promos now. But I think it was that sativa bitch. And I feel safe saying bitch because I know it's a Twitter lesbian. I know it's a man behind that account. And in her moveset, she's a heel. But in her moveset, every time she does one of her big moves, the crowd chants an entire sentence that's a movie quote from Serenity.
I'm sure they would.
Oh, yeah. You know, like crowds are really good at chanting full sentences at heels organically.
In unison.
Like, you know, yeah, in complete unison. And I think I just pointed that out at one point, and I watched a meltdown happen, and then I got blocked. I was blocked by the entire website Action Wrestling until 2 days ago. They just unblocked me after I wrote a promo for the EW Mania tournament where Mike Best takes a shit while trying to find out who Action Wrestling is because they have him blocked. And I just wrote a promo that was a Twitter live video of random fans, all of them named Mark, writing in to talk about how great Action Wrestling was. And I think that finally got me unblocked. Because I publicly shamed them for it. But yeah, I guess all my best feuds that aren't HOW only are basically just me publicly bullying people on Twitter.
That's what I think you were most known for. Even when I was introduced to you, it was you fighting with so-and-so or you fighting with this person. And that's okay because
it's fun on my end anyway.
That's okay. It's a hobby.
I've never been mad about e-fedding in my entire life. I think I got pissed off once in a Fed called AWO because the Fed had me win my first world title match, but it was by DQ, so the title didn't change hands. And I was like 13 years old and so mad that I almost threw my keyboard. It was my first ever world title match. That was the last time I was angry in e-fedding. So, like, if you think that I'm, like, sitting behind my keyboard, like, rage typing at you, I promise you I'm not. It's not that serious.
And that's the way it should be, folks. There's a lot of butt hurt in 2019.
I feel safe saying too much.
Let's get over it. All right, so talk to us briefly about Alex Beckman, how it came to be, and the UTA run. Because that's where I was introduced to you as a handler and the character.
So Alex Beckman was kind of cool. I don't know, are you familiar with, I asked this like I'm not going to explain it anyway, but are you familiar with Stephen King and his relationship to the author Richard Bachman?
I am not.
Some people are, some people aren't, but the short of it is Stephen King hit a point in his career as an author where he went, am I still good or do people buy my books because I'm Stephen King? And up to this point, I had never had an alternate character ever. And I was just starting to wonder, do I keep winning because I'm still doing good? Or is there like an unconscious bias in Lee's head that, oh, well, Mike always writes good. He probably won. Like, it's very easy to do that. We all do it every day when you look at a card and go, that match isn't even going to be close. Well, when you read those role plays, that's already in your head.
Right.
So you're automatically going in with a bias, and every Fed head in the world is biased whether they realize it or not. It's just the ones who are good at mitigating it are the good Fed heads. So I wanted to find out if I was still good or not. And I'd been following the MMA career of Ronda Rousey. This is pretty early into Rousey mania. Long before she was a wrestler, long before she lost her first fight in MMA. She was still just unstoppable and had this attitude problem. And I slowly started building this female MMA fighter named Alex Beckman. And since my character used to always be a misogynist, I knew the last thing anybody would expect, because everybody assumes everything you do in character means you're an asshole. Nobody would expect me to run a female character. So I invented like a completely secondary OOC person. I didn't even tell Lee, because if I did, the whole experiment would have been ruined. I joined HOW with this secondary character while I was supposed to be on a break and just wanted to see how I did. So I ran up a couple of wins in HOW before everybody found out it was me and the experiment was over. I fucked up and I made myself a poser, and I was like one of 2 dudes left doing posers even back then. So as soon as I had a poser, it was either me or Halcom. And it definitely wasn't Halcom. So when me and Lee had the big falling out and I went to UTA, I decided not to bring Mike Best over there. That was part of my agreement with Lee, too, is I was like, look, dude, I'm just going to go do something else for a while. I won't even bring Mike Best over there. I'll bring Alex Beckman over there. So I brought Alex Beckman in with Mike Best as the manager of a stable called The Machine. And it was Alex Beckman, Cecilworth Farthington, a cat goes by John Sector, HOW Hall of Famer. And we had a pretty good run over there, had a good feud with Dynasty. And I think I ran up like 9 or 10 matches undefeated up to a world title match with La Flama Blanca. And which, by the way, I didn't know until 4 years later was a fucking character from Eastbound and Down. God damn it. But I had told Ben, I don't know, maybe 2 months prior that like I was just going to run till the wheels fell off on Alex Beckman. Because I just never got the hang of really writing for this character anyway. I can write female characters, but Beckman just never developed a personality of her own. She was just kind of like Mike Best with tits.
Yeah.
And I think Ben even described her like that in roleplay feedback at one point. He's like, this just feels like Mike Best cutting a promo through Alex Beckman's mouth. Because I'd never run a side character before. Now I run like 5 of them, and none of you know who they are, and you all love me on my other accounts, just so you know. But, yeah, so I told Ben, I'm like, when I finally lose, I'm done. Not like a butthurt thing. I told him this 2 months out. I was just like, because I didn't have any, to me, I had no interest in telling Ronda Rousey's redemption story.
Right.
I wanted, because at that point, Rousey had already lost and taken her ball and went home and had her big pout fit. And I was like, well, that's Alex Beckman. I figured I'd just bring in Mike Best after that. That was always the plan, is that Alex Beckman, whenever she lost, whether that was her 3rd match or a world title match against La Flama Blanca, when she lost, I was done. I was carrying a title. You're a douchebag if you just lose your smile while you're a champion. Wait till you lose the damn thing. So I lost to La Flama Blanca. I was going to take like a week off and come back with Mike Best, and then real life got fucked up, and then I disappeared from Efedding until like 2019. No, I didn't. I did briefly go back to HOW after that, but for like 4 matches. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's not that much to talk about with Beckman. She's an underdeveloped character. It was just me wanting to do something different, and it ended up just being the same old shit anyway. She was just like an MMA fighter who accidentally killed some chick in Japan. Because she wanted to fight men, and they wouldn't let her fight men, so she killed some Japanese girl in a MMA fight, and like came to the United States. It was not a particularly inspired character, but it was basically how I met everybody at UTA.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was how I was introduced to Mike Best and Alex Beckman, and it was a good time. Awesome, man. Well, hey, I appreciate you taking the time out and coming on the show. Thanks for doing the interview and telling us a little bit about the history and some of the fun stuff that's going on.
Sure thing. It was fun. I'd do it any time if you didn't have a list so long that you'll be doing this when you're 70.
That's the way it seems. All right, Mike. Hey, appreciate you coming on. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
All right, guys, and that's going to wrap it up for another episode of the Efed Podcast. Check us out at efedpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a review for us. Follow us at the Efed Podcast on Twitter. Please support our sponsors, EWC, Extreme Wrestling Corporation. You can find them at ewc4life.com. The Atomic Dropcast. We're here on the Atomic Dropcast Network. You can find my other podcast there, atomicdropcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And Defiance Wrestling. DefianceWrestling.com, a great angle fed. Thanks to our guest, Mike Best, and thank you to all of you for listening to another episode of the Efed Podcast.